I thought I was completely done with this whole Abba and Preach situation. That was last month and I had moved on entirely, until I came across their video titled Fake Dr. Cheyenne Bryant Exposed. Interesting choice of title, considering they misspelled her last name, but regardless, I found it worth noting that they decided to weigh in on the Cheyenne Bryant situation, and Abba made some points that are genuinely worth discussing. His core argument was about regulatory accountability and consumer protection. He pointed out that when a licensed professional operates under a governing board, that board serves as a critical layer of protection for the public. If a licensed therapist commits malpractice, a client who cannot afford a private attorney still has recourse. They can file a complaint with the relevant regulatory body, such as a board of behavioral sciences, and that board has the authority to investigate and hold the professional accountable. The point being that Cheyenne Bryant, operating without a license, removes that entire layer of protection from anyone who works with her. If someone has a dispute or suffers harm as a result of her services, they have significantly fewer options for recourse than they would with a licensed and board-regulated professional. And honestly, that is a completely valid and important point. The licensing system exists precisely to protect everyday people who cannot afford expensive legal battles. He would go on to raise another point worth getting into as well.
He got arrested because he was just putting teeth in people, never trained as a dentist, cheaper, unlicensed, lying about whatever ability he had. And he was people's mouths where they need 10 years of surgery.
Yeah, but I don't want to go through.
Abba then brought up another strong example to reinforce his point about the dangers of unlicensed practitioners. He referenced a case out of Atlanta where an individual was performing dental work and installing teeth in patients' mouths, despite having absolutely zero formal dental training or credentials. The consequences for some of those patients were severe, requiring years of corrective procedures just to undo the damage caused by someone who had no business practicing in the first place. It is a powerful parallel to the Cheyenne Bryant situation, and Abba deserves credit for making that connection clearly. Consumer protection regulations exist for exactly this reason. And by the way, if you are enjoying this content, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss when we post something new. Moving forward in the video, Abba also took direct aim at the questions surrounding her academic credentials, specifically the legitimacy of her claimed doctorate degree. This was clearly a point he felt strongly about and was prepared to dig into with some real depth.
Just show us your paper. The reason why is that when you end this program, you have to write a long paper on a specific subject. It has to be reviewed by a specific professor that you should be able to name because that person's on the board that they're going to review your paper and let you know if you passed, right? She can't name any of that. She can't name.
And honestly, this is solid work from Abba on the surface. The argument that Cheyenne Bryant should be able to produce a dissertation, show her transcripts, and demonstrate that she actually completed the requirements of a doctoral program is completely reasonable. If you are going to present yourself to the public as a doctor, you should be able to back that up with verifiable evidence. On that specific point, the critique is valid and hard to argue against. But here is where things get complicated, because while Abba is calling out Cheyenne Bryant for not being able to prove her credentials, there are serious and well-documented questions about Abba's own conduct and integrity that make it very difficult to receive this critique at face value. He made claims about himself in the past that he was never required to substantiate, and yet he was simultaneously using his platform in ways that directly harmed people who trusted him. When that behavior came to light, rather than face accountability, attempts were made to silence and discredit the people speaking out. That is not the behavior of someone with the moral standing to lead a conversation about authenticity and accountability. And that brings us to the regulatory body argument. Abba made the point that a governing board can hold unlicensed practitioners accountable when they cause harm. That is a genuinely good point about consumer protection, but the parallel is impossible to ignore. When a group of people on YouTube effectively formed their own community accountability structure and began pushing back on Abba's behavior, the response was not transparency or accountability. It was an attempt to dox and discredit them. So, the same logic Abba applies to Cheyenne Bryant avoiding regulatory oversight applies directly to how he handled people who tried to hold him to a standard. This is why the video did not perform the way their content used to. It is not just about the topic. People have lost trust in the messengers. When a channel builds its entire identity around calling out other people's lack of integrity, and then the hosts are exposed for the exact same behavior they criticize, the audience feels that disconnect immediately. Years of content telling other people to be solid, calling out fresh and fit, demanding accountability from everyone else, and then the evidence comes out showing the same conduct behind closed doors. That is not something an audience easily forgets or moves past. And here is the distinction worth making. When Cheyenne Bryant conducts one of her unlicensed sessions, the harm is largely contained to the individual in front of her. People can choose whether or not to engage with her services. What Abba and Preach built was a platform specifically dedicated to moral and social commentary, holding others to standards of honesty, accountability, and integrity every single day across years of content. That is a fundamentally different responsibility. When that standard collapses from the inside, it does not just affect one interaction, it calls into question every single piece of commentary they have ever produced. Every critique now reflects back on them. Every standard they apply to others now applies to themselves. And the audience can see it, feel it, and they respond accordingly by disengaging. It is genuinely unfortunate to watch because there was real potential there. You do not have to be perfect to be a credible voice. Everyone makes mistakes and falls short of their own values at times. But there is a meaningful difference between imperfection and actively doing the things you built a platform condemning. That gap is what has made Abba and Preach's content so difficult to watch without the weight of what has been exposed hanging over every word. So, what do you all think about this situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments.